The most valuable companies on Earth are about to pour $750 billion into artificial intelligence this year, and the men in charge of it keep quietly telling you the whole thing might be a bubble. That's not a hater. That's not some doomer on the internet. That's Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, the company sitting at the dead center of all of this at a press dinner in the summer of 2025, saying out loud that investors as a whole are overexcited about AI. He compared it to the dot-com era. He said someone is going to get burnt. When the man selling the shovels tells you the gold rush might be fake, you should probably lean in, because something genuinely strange is happening in the AI industry right now. On paper, it's the greatest boom in the history of technology. Underneath, it's a machine that loses money on almost everything it does, held together by a web of deals so circular that a famous crash predictor has bet over $1 billion, that it's all going to come crashing down. So let's actually break down what the hell is going on. And to understand it, you have to start with a number that shouldn't be possible. OpenAI, the makers of ChatGPT, are valued at around $852 billion. That valuation was set in March 2026, when they raised $122 billion in a single funding round, reportedly the largest private tech fundraise ever recorded. Investors were tripping over each other to get in. Now, here's where it gets weird. That same company is running at roughly $25 billion a year in revenue, about $2 billion a month. Sounds enormous, right? Except it's burning cash faster than almost any company in history. Internal projections point to losses of around $14 billion in 2026 alone. By one analysis, OpenAI loses about $1.22 for every single dollar it earns. Every time you type a question into ChatGPT, it costs them money to answer it, which means the more popular they get, the more money they lose. Their own success is the thing bleeding them dry. And it gets more absurd. In November 2025, Altman casually mentioned that OpenAI was looking at about $1.4 trillion in infrastructure and compute commitments over the next 8 years. Trillion with a T. A figure bigger than the entire economy of Spain. This from a company pulling in around $20 billion in revenue at the time. Analysts did the math and basically said, this doesn't work. You cannot commit $1.4 trillion when you make $20 billion. By February 2026, OpenAI had quietly walked that number back to around $600 billion, which is still an amount of money that makes no sense against what they actually earn. So how do you fund a bet this size when the numbers don't add up? Simple. You don't use your own money, you use everyone else's. And that's where the second reason things are getting strange comes in. Here's a loop that should make you deeply uncomfortable. Follow it carefully. NVIDIA, the chip company, invests in OpenAI. OpenAI uses that money to rent cloud computing from Oracle. Oracle uses its money to buy chips from NVIDIA. NVIDIA also owns a stake in CoreWeave, a cloud provider which turns around and supplies computing power to OpenAI. Round and round it goes. The same dollars keep circling between the same handful of companies. And every time they loop, everybody's revenue looks bigger. NVIDIA sells more chips. Oracle books more cloud deals. OpenAI announces more capacity. On paper, the entire industry looks like it's exploding with demand. But a huge chunk of that demand is just these companies funding each other. The deals are real, and they are massive. In September 2025, NVIDIA signed a letter of intent to invest up to $100 billion in OpenAI. NVIDIA has also put money into Anthropic, OpenAI's biggest rival. Google agreed to backstop lease payments for Anthropic's data centers, helping it secure what amounts to a $35 billion loan. And as recently as late July 2026, the Wall Street Journal reported NVIDIA was in talks to guarantee $250 billion in financing for a single OpenAI data center in Ohio. Analysts have a name for this. They call it circular financing, and it has happened before. Rewind to the dot-com bubble. Telecom equipment makers like Lucent Technologies handed generous financing to their own customers, who used that money to buy Lucent's equipment. Revenue looked spectacular. Then the customers couldn't repay the loans, and the whole thing collapsed. Lucent stock went from over $80 to under $1. When the Nasdaq peaked and burst in 2000, it fell 77%, and it took about 15 years to fully recover. CNBC's Jim Cramer looked at the NVIDIA OpenAI deals and said it plainly. He lived through 2000, and he doesn't want the sequel. Now, the companies pushing back have a fair point. NVIDIA says these investments genuinely support the AI ecosystem and will pay off long term. And unlike the dot-com era, these are not fantasy startups with no revenue. NVIDIA makes real money, obscene money, with profit margins reported around 75%. In October 2025, it became the first company ever to hit a $5 trillion market value. That's not a promise. That's cash in the bank. So maybe this is a virtuous circle, locking in supply in a market where computing power is genuinely scarce. Maybe. But that's exactly the problem with a bubble. The story always sounds reasonable right up until the moment it doesn't. Here's the part that should really make you sit up. It isn't just outside critics sounding the alarm, it's the people inside the industry. In August 2025, a study out of MIT dropped like a bomb. It found that 95% of corporate AI pilot programs were delivering no measurable return on investment, despite companies pouring somewhere between $35 and $40 billion into them. Now, to be fair, the study blamed bad corporate rollout companies not knowing how to actually use the tools rather than the AI itself being useless. But the market didn't care about the nuance. It read the headline 95% fail, and it panicked. In the days around that report and Altman's bubble comments, US tech stocks shed roughly $1 trillion in value. Nvidia dropped 3.5%. Palantir dropped nearly 10%. Then Mark Zuckerberg, a man spending fortunes on AI at Meta, admitted that a bubble, even a collapse, was definitely a possibility. His argument? Sure, we might be overspending. But being late to AI is scarier than wasting money on it. That's the logic driving the entire industry right now. Everyone's terrified of missing out, so everyone keeps spending, even the ones who suspect it's a bubble. And then there's Michael Burry. If that name rings a bell, it's because he's the investor who predicted the 2008 housing crash the guy Christian Bale played in The Big Short. Burry has come out of the shadows to bet enormous sums against the AI trade, taking positions against Nvidia, Palantir, and the chip sector as a whole. His argument is sharp. He says a handful of companies make up around half of Nvidia's data center revenue, so if even one of them cuts back, the whole thing wobbles. He argues companies are quietly making their earnings look better by pretending their expensive chips will last longer than they will. And he says a dangerous amount of all this demand is propped up by exactly the kind of circular, off-the-books financing we just talked about. Even the credit rating agency Moody's has warned that the roughly $1 trillion a year AI build-out is draining the cash reserves of some of the richest companies on the planet. So you've got the CEO of OpenAI, the CEO of Meta, a legendary crash predictor, and a major ratings agency, all pointing at the same thing. That's not noise, that's a pattern. While Wall Street argues about valuations, the effects are already landing on real people. Because to build AI, you need two things in staggering quantities: workers you can replace, and electricity. On the job side, the picture is genuinely unsettling, though not in the way the headlines scream. One tracker estimated that AI was cited in layoffs, affecting around 205,000 US workers through August 2026, already matching the entire previous year in under 8 months. In January 2026, Amazon announced 16,000 job cuts, with its CEO saying flat out that AI and automation would shrink the corporate workforce in the coming years. But here's the more precise, more disturbing truth from Stanford's research. It's not mass firings yet. It's that the door is quietly closing for people trying to get in. Employment for software developers aged 22 to 25 fell about 20% from its peak, even as jobs for older developers stayed roughly flat. AI isn't erasing careers so much as strangling the first rung of the ladder before young people can climb it. Then there's power. AI is astonishingly hungry for electricity. A single AI query can burn up to 1,000 times the energy of a normal web search. The United States now hosts over 5,400 data centers, more than 10 times any other country. In some regions, these facilities are straining the local grid so hard that they're driving up electricity prices for ordinary households. Tech companies are now signing deals for their own gas plants and nuclear power just to keep the machines fed. The AI you use to write an email is quietly reshaping the national power supply. So, is it 1,996 or 2,000? That's the real question hanging over everything. Is this the early internet in 1996, messy, overhyped, but about to change the world and mint fortunes? Or is it the dot-com peak in 2000, right before the floor gave way? Because here's the genuinely confusing part. The technology is real, and it's improving fast. The models keep getting dramatically better. China has closed the gap to a razor's edge. Stanford found the top US model led the best Chinese one by just 2.7% in early 2026. In May 2026, Anthropic actually overtook OpenAI to become the most valuable AI startup, reaching a valuation around $965 billion. This is not a field standing still. It's a field sprinting so hard it's setting money on fire to keep up. And the moment of truth is coming. In June 2026, OpenAI confidentially filed the paperwork to go public, reportedly chasing a valuation of $1 trillion, which would make it one of the largest stock market debuts in history. But the timing keeps slipping, and even OpenAI's own CFO reportedly wanted to wait, because an IPO means something terrifying for a company like this. For the first time ever, the whole world gets to see the real numbers, the actual losses, the actual debts, the actual math behind the magic. That's what makes this the strangest moment in tech. We are watching the biggest bet in the history of business get placed in real time, with trillions on the table, and nobody, not the critics, not the CEOs, not even the man running the company at the center of it all, can tell you for certain whether it's the future or a mirage. Sam Altman already told us how he sees it. Someone is going to get burnt. The only question left is who. So what do you think? Is this the internet in 1996? Or the crash of 2000 all over again? Are we watching the birth of the future? Or the biggest bubble in history inflating in real time? Drop your take in the comments, I read them, and I want to know which side you're on before the numbers finally come out. And if you want to actually understand this stuff while everyone else is just panicking or hyping, hit subscribe. This story is going to move fast over the next few months. The IPO, the deals, the possible pop, and I'll be breaking down every twist as it happens. Give this video a like if it made the chaos make a little more sense, and I'll see you in the next one.